Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is a non-TCG, and wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about indie games and how they fail. And obviously, since COVID hit, there have been an astronomical number of indie TCGs that have failed. And generally speaking, they get popular, the boxes go up, and the management team gets greedy. So I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about Sorcery. So Sorcery Contested Realms, as we can see here, launched March 15th, 2022. So it was at the very, very tail end of the COVID boom. This was about the time, MetaZoo launched, or I guess they shipped their Kickstarter products February, March of 2021. But this is about the time where they shipped that overprinted Wilderness. The entire Flesh and Blood world blew up because of Monarch and Channel Fireball, and the boxes just plummeted. So this is really where there were kind of a bunch of cracks in the bubble. But it was a huge success. And I know Rudy had mentioned something, and I believe they raised something like $5 million at the time, was a record for Kickstarter TCGs. So there were some well-documented delays and some disastrous communication by the company. But look, they were figuring it out. And I think the most interesting thing with Sorcery is, well, a lot of these Kickstarter games at the time were, a kid in his basement or some, Ivy League smartass pretending he had an idea what he was doing. The Eric Olafson, was a self-made, relatively wealthy person. So this was somewhat of a pet project. So, the concept of having a really cool game that wasn't in it for the money, quote unquote, was something that was really different than everything else out there. So July 2023, Alpha Kickstarter shipped, and I believe the boxes were $120 to $150 a box, depending on what you got in with Kickstarter. They immediately went up to $200, $300, $400, $500. And I believe they peaked as high as somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a box. And now they're sitting somewhere around, just above $1,000. So, huge success. I believe they printed 29,000 and change boxes. And quite honestly, it's a fun game. And the chase was fun. They had the curios in there that the company never mentioned anything about, just to keep them a little mysterious. And the foils, which were, 1 in 6, 1 in 7 packs, pretty rare. So beta launched. Initially, beta was supposed to launch in August of 2023. Alpha got delayed. Beta got delayed till October. Then it finally launched in November. And distribution was an absolute disaster. So there were a lot of stores that were trying to get product that didn't make the Kickstarter. They had an innkeeper program where if you pledged as an innkeeper, which is a glorified brick and mortar store, you had first dibs on distribution for beta. But since a lot of stores didn't get in, they had no way to get the product. So the disaster was effectively they used PhD, Peach State, and Southern Hobby, and they basically just shipped all the product to their high spenders, high accounts who just dumped the product almost immediately, and stores never had a chance to get the product in place. So MSRP on the beta boxes was just about $150. They traded up to $200, $250. We'll take a look at the chart. What's interesting here, there's only a 1-year chart, but here in March of 2024, the boxes spiked as high as 300. The company came out and said they're done with the print runs. There's going to be a small print run hitting the U.S. in late summer, which hit end of August, early September, where they actually did a really nice job of sending boxes to brick and mortar stores. The unfortunate thing with that is a lot of the players were gone because there was no way to build a local scene because there was no product. So, fast forward to October, and a couple weeks ago, Arthurian Legends, which was the first real expansion, the first completely new set since the Kickstarter launched. And they came out and they announced they were going to launch it in 2 waves. And I suspect it's 2 waves because they had logistical challenges, which they've had since the beginning of the life of the company. The boxes are printed in China, and the quality is not bad. It's not great, but it's not terrible for sure. So the first wave hit, and MSRP on the boxes was a little bit less. even though distribution cost was higher, squeezed about $20 of margin outside of the boxes. And I don't know if that was something they did to try to pay a little bit extra for the distributors to change how they did the allocation, or it was something where the company thought, well, the boxes are going to go to 150 anyway, so we don't really care what MSRP is. It's a number we'll put out there, and the boxes will go higher. Well, what happened is the boxes came out, and the alpha boxes were 39 packs. The beta boxes were 36 packs. These boxes are 24 packs, so they're very similar to what your Flesh and Blood boxes are. And the set was much smaller, so 220-ish cards, about 30 super hard to pull specialty cards. But at 220 cards and call it 60 uniques, so a unique's one in every 4 to 6 packs, so call it 5 or 6 in a box. The cards got boring really fast, unlike Alpha and Beta, which was a 402, 403 card set. So, what we've seen, and as part of the distribution here, they made a concerted effort to send them to brick and mortar stores. So what we see here is an absolute, I don't want to say implosion, because that's not a fair statement, but the boxes came out at 130 and traded immediately down to 116. Now what's interesting is the current volume on TCG Player is only about 90 boxes, and Gamers Guild AZ is one that I follow, because you can see they have a good idea of where the market is. They'll move the prices of the product back and forth, but they've had a constant number of boxes, so quite honestly there's not that much moving. So I think part of the challenge here is you have the investor in the collector space, but the player population is growing slowly, and you're either in and you've been in for a while, or you have no idea what's going on with the game, unless you have a friend that taps you on the shoulder. So Sorcery is in a weird situation, and we'll get back to talking about where indies fail, and this is really the inflection point, at least in my opinion, of where the game is going to succeed or the game is going to fail. You have the loud folks saying that they have to print a lot, keep the product cheap, get it out to stores for players. Well, unfortunately, the ship sailed on the stores right now because they screwed up the original beta distribution so bad. There aren't a whole lot of local play groups, and they're certainly, stores aren't going to make the investment to do it, especially with the margin on these boxes being $20 a box tighter than what they were before. That's the unfortunate truth about indies is, they effectively have to price in enough margin to bribe the stores to carry the product and get it to the end user. So that's not going to happen here. So it's going to have to be a massive slog of organic growth. And as we saw with Flesh and Blood, they basically said, what, F the collectors and investors, we're going to push to a straight players game. And that's the old product has been dead money and dead weight forever. And quite honestly, it's probably never going to recover. You're going to have hardcore players at play, and it'll continue, but it's going to shrink down, in my opinion. And one day it's going to be Weiss, Vanguard, Card Fight, whatever. And it's just going to slog around. So as part of the distribution, initially there was a wave 1. Now there's this theoretical wave 2. Wave 2 is, I'm assuming based on what I've heard from distributors, is about the same size as wave 1. So for example, we got about 2/3 of what we asked for from PhD and about 1/3 from Southern Hobby. And that seems to be about what folks have gotten fairly consistently. But as we can see here, again, there's only 90 boxes on the market. There've been 723 that have sold. We back up to 3 months, a little bit more. The market's saturated and it needs to settle down. And there is there is product getting ripped. There is product that is getting purchased, but it's been far slower than I think anyone expected. So if this second wave hits anytime in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, 2 months, it's absolutely going to crush the game. And the game is going to most likely die, or they're in for a very, very long trek because the demand simply isn't there. And a lot of the stores completely overordered because they just assumed it was free money, no different than beta. So hopefully the people running Sorcery are far more intelligent than the folks that have blown up these other indie games. And they were smart enough to realize that, hey, stores are going to overorder. So the demand that I'm seeing from PhD and Southern isn't what the real demand is, and I have to throttle that back. And if they didn't do that, hopefully they have the ability to delay the second wave and just kind of sit it out there, really quite similar to what they did with beta. Now, I don't think they had intended on 3 or 4 waves of beta. I think that was just kind of a sit back and wait and see approach and push into the market as needed. But I am 100% certain right now that more product isn't needed. I would like to see these boxes north of 150, 175 before we get to that point. Because quite honestly, I've talked to a couple different stores who are on the website in the Sorcery Play Network, and they haven't run events in a while because they didn't have product, and they got a reasonable allocation of Arthurian Legends, and they haven't sold a single box or a single pack because quite honestly, nobody gives a shit. And I hate to say that, but the game has to grow organically through word of mouth at this point, and they kind of screwed up with the first wave of beta getting out there. So hopefully they don't ship the second wave out. They give the product a chance to settle down. The product starts to speak on its own. Because look, the cards are cool. The game's a lot of fun. It's a little slow, for my liking, but I'm married with 2 kids. So, I can't sit down for hours on end and play, kiddie games. But again, my fear is if they get greedy and they get stupid, which they may, and they push this second wave out to make a little bit of extra money, this is going to be the last set that comes out. And they've talked about releasing 1 set a year. If this is a set and they saturate the market right now, nobody's going to give a shit in a year. Nobody's going to give a shit in 6 months. So let's see what they do, and I'll keep everybody posted on what I hear from distribution. But hopefully they do the right thing and they don't launch anything, or they don't release this new product. So look, if you guys thought this was a cool video, feel free to like, subscribe, and join the Discord. We do have a bunch of sealed product. We sell it at very, very cheap prices, just to kind of keep things churning and burning. So, all right, take it easy, bye.